And more now on the Middle East. Will the ceasefire reached today between Israel and Hamas hold? And what about longer term, more difficult issues between the two sides? Ray Suarez picks it up.
I'm joined now by veteran diplomat and former ambassador Nicholas Burns and Hisham Melhem, Washington bureau chief for Al Arabiya TV. Mr. Ambassador, as you heard from our reporters earlier in the program, the shooting has stopped, but has it really ended the conflict?
Well, Ray, it certainly hasn't ended the conflict. I do think there's a fairly good chance that this ceasefire will hold for two reasons. First, the Israelis have had a very, very tough week. Their entire civilian population in the southern part of the country has been in bomb shelters, out of school, out of work. They had the terrible bombing of the bus in Tel Aviv today, and rockets fired for the very first time at Jerusalem, where several 100,000 Palestinians live. So I think the Israelis have made their point that they will defend their country. Their Iron Dome anti-missile system responded very, very well to the rocket attacks. And on the Palestinian side, I think Egypt, Turkey and Qatar will make sure that Hamas adheres to the ceasefire terms. They'll put enormous pressure on the Hamas leadership to cease and desist. So I do think in an immediate sense we'll see the ceasefire hold. But the much bigger question is, what can the United States and Egypt do now to strengthen the ceasefire and to make it durable so that we don't end up back in this situation in a couple of weeks or a couple of months' time?
Can it be made durable, Hisham?
Only if the United States decides to play a pivotal, important, direct role. And we've seen Secretary Clinton in Cairo saying that we will work to consolidate and build on this ceasefire to help the people of Gaza and to maintain Israel's security. But there is absolutely no serious talk about reviving America's pivotal role in the Middle East. And unless you have a political horizon, this thing will hold. I would expect it to hold. The ceasefire will hold in the foreseeable future. That's the only thing we can talk about with some certainty, because Netanyahu needs quiet on the southern front so that he can prepare for his election campaign. He tested the Iron Dome successfully for a potential conflict, a bigger conflict probably with Iran and or Hezbollah in the future. He degraded Hamas's arsenal. He made the point, so to speak. Hamas will stick to a ceasefire right now because they need to rebuild. They proved the point. They will have the crossings opened. They got a commitment from the Israelis that there will be a targeted assassination of their leaders. And now they are on excellent terms with their new ally, President Morsi in Cairo. So for all these reasons, ceasefire will hold. But but if you don't have a political horizon, this thing will crumble maybe next year.
Ambassador, do you agree with Hisham's conclusion that there's no wider American role in the offing?
Oh, I think there's a possibility of a wider American role, but it will be different than the typical role of trying to negotiate a final status peace agreement between the Israelis and Palestinians. That's really not possible now because the Palestinian community is so divided between the Palestinian Authority in Ramallah on the West Bank and Hamas in Gaza. But the United States could take a page out of the history books. Henry Kissinger, after the October War of 1973, negotiated a series of disengagement agreements between the Egyptian and Israeli armies at that time. That's probably where the United States should put its emphasis. Can we strengthen and make more durable the ceasefire arrangements in Gaza? Will Israel agree to ease up on the economic restrictions on the very badly suffering civilian population among the Palestinians? And can the Israelis be given in turn some confidence that Hamas is not going to strike again? I think that's where you'll see the American effort over the next couple of days and couple of weeks. And I do think this crisis, Ray, points to the centrality of the United States. We are not playing the same role in the Middle East as we did before the Arab revolutions, but you saw that the ceasefire was not able to be put together until Secretary of State Hillary Clinton arrived in Jerusalem and then shuttled between meetings with Netanyahu and President Mohamed Morsi. And I guess I just say finally there, this was a very important test of the Egyptian leadership, and they passed it. They put pressure on Hamas. They put the original deal together, and they are now a very important force in the Middle East, this new Muslim Brotherhood-dominated government.
You've both been very cautious. Should we also be talking a little bit about what's not happening? After that bus bombing, there were rising calls inside Israel for a land invasion of Gaza, and that's not happening. Should the world be relieved by that?
Well, the world should be relieved by that. The civilian population of Gaza should be relieved by that. And, look, Netanyahu learned a few lessons from the last incursion to Gaza in 2008. I mean, when you go in, you don't know the conditions, that will prevail when you're trying to disengage. And disengagement is not easy. I think, let me just address the point that Ambassador Burns mentioned. He was focused on Gaza, and he's correct. And by the way, Hamas all along wanted to have what we call in Arabic hudna, which is a truce or an armistice, not a peace treaty, no peace agreement. And they may get that. The point is, Gaza is only one piece of the puzzle. The main Palestinian territory is in the West Bank, and one of the biggest losers now is President Abbas and the Palestinian Authority, where the Israelis continue their settlement activities, and now Hamas addressed Khalid Mash'al, the leader of Hamas in Cairo today, addressed the Palestinian President Abbas by saying, there are lessons to be learned here, and the main lesson is that resistance, quote unquote, works, and that's the only choice. Now, nobody is talking to the leadership in Ramallah. In fact, the secretary today or yesterday went to Ramallah to urge the Palestinian president not to go to New York and seek recognition of a Palestinian state. But the real power now is wielded by the Palestinians in Gaza, where they can claim that radicalism and militancy and resistance pays off. And I think this is an issue that only can be addressed seriously by the United States. The United States is still the indispensable power in the Middle East, and I think there has to be a revival of the traditional American, even when the parties are not close. If you leave the Palestinians and the Israelis to their own devices, forever they will not reach peace, because the Israelis are too powerful to make any concessions, and the Palestinians are too weak, and they cannot make too much concessions anyway.
In the very little amount of time we have left, Ambassador, was this a big moment for the government of Mohamed Morsi? Was this their first, their coming out party on the world stage? And did they pass a kind of test?
This was a major moment for Mohamed Morsi. There were a lot of doubts about how he would lead Egypt, whether he would maintain the peace agreement with Israel, and he showed that he's very tough-minded. He's willing to pressure Hamas. He was able to work with the Turkish and Qatari governments as well as the United States. He can be, based on this performance, I think, an important partner for the United States. I would think this is a confidence builder, both for the Israelis and Americans, in knowing that they have a stable and impressive leadership in Cairo now that we can deal with.
Ambassador Burns, Hisham Melhem, good to talk to you both.
Thank you.